The orc woman collapsed at Xander Frost's doorstep on the coldest night of winter, her green skin pale with frostbite and her breath coming in ragged gasps that froze in the air before him. He had been about to close his cabin door against the howling wind when he saw her sprawled across his porch steps, one arm outstretched as though she had been reaching for help even as consciousness left her. For a heartbeat, Xander stood frozen, every survival instinct screaming at him to slam the door and bar it shut. Orcs were enemies of humankind. The war had ended only 3 years ago, but the scars remained fresh in every village and homestead along the frontier. His own brother had fallen to an orc war band during the final campaign, but this woman was dying. Her lips had turned blue, and beneath the grime and dried blood that covered her face, he could see the sunken hollows of starvation. She wore nothing but tattered rags that might have once been clothing, and her feet were wrapped in strips of cloth so worn through that he could see her blackened toes. Whatever she had been, whatever her people had done, she was no threat to him now. Xander cursed under his breath and grabbed her under the arms, dragging her inside. She was heavier than a human woman would have been, all muscle and dense bone, and he grunted with the effort of hauling her to the hearth. The fire had burned down to embers, but he stoked it quickly, adding wood until flames leaped high and cast dancing shadows across the cabin walls. He stripped away the frozen rags she wore, trying to maintain some clinical distance even as he noted the mottled bruises that covered her ribs and back. Someone had beaten her badly and recently. Her dark hair had been hacked short, unevenly, as though with a blade wielded in haste or anger. When he peeled away the cloth wrappings on her feet, he winced at the damage beneath. She had walked for miles through snow without proper shoes, and at least 2 of her toes were frostbitten beyond saving. Xander wrapped her in every blanket he owned and heated water to bathe her wounds. She did not wake as he worked, though occasionally she would whimper or mutter something in the orcish tongue, words he could not understand. He had learned a few phrases of their language during the war, mostly commands and threats, but whatever she was saying went beyond his limited knowledge. By the time dawn broke through his cabin windows, he had done all he could. Her wounds were cleaned and bandaged, her body warmed, and he had managed to get a few spoonfuls of broth down her throat during a moment of semi-consciousness. Now there was nothing to do but wait and see if she had the strength to survive. Xander sat in his chair by the fire and studied her face. She was young, perhaps no more than 20 summers. Her tusks were small and straight, unmarred by the notches and carvings that orc warriors traditionally added as marks of honor. Her features, relaxed in sleep, held a delicacy that surprised him. He had always thought of orcs as brutal and savage-looking, but there was something almost noble in the shape of her face, the high cheekbones and strong jaw, what had brought her to his door. The nearest orc settlements were 50 miles east, deep in the territories they had claimed after the war's end. No orc traveled alone through human lands, not unless they were fleeing something worse than the risk of human violence. She slept through that entire day and into the next night. Xander went about his usual work, checking his trap lines and feeding his animals, but he found himself constantly returning to the cabin to look in on her. Each time he feared he would find her dead, but each time her chest still rose and fell with shallow breaths. On the second morning her eyes opened. They were amber-colored, he discovered, bright and fierce, even clouded with pain. She stared at him for a long moment, and he saw her body tense as she prepared to flee or fight despite her weakness. He held up both hands, showing he held no weapon. "Easy," he said softly. "You are safe here. I am not going to hurt you." She said nothing, just watched him with those burning eyes, Her hand crept slowly to her side, seeking a weapon that was not there. He could see the moment she realized she was unarmed and naked beneath the blankets, and shame crossed her face before it hardened into defiance. "You understand me?" Xander asked. "Do you speak the common tongue?" "I understand." Her voice was rough, whether from disuse or thirst he could not tell. The accent was thick, but the words were clear. "Why did you help me?" It was a good question, and one he had been asking himself for 2 days. "You were dying on my doorstep. I could not leave you there." Most humans would have. There was no accusation in her tone, just flat statement of fact. Most humans are not me. He stood and ladled soup from the pot that hung over the fire, bringing it to her in a wooden bowl. "Can you sit up to eat?" She tried, and he watched pain flash across her face as her battered body protested. Pride kept her from crying out, but she could not manage more than a few inches before falling back against the bundled blankets. After a moment of internal struggle, she nodded permission for him to help her. Xander slipped an arm behind her shoulders and lifted her gently, propping her against the wall. She kept the blanket clutched to her chest with one hand, and he pretended not to notice as he offered her the soup. She took the bowl with shaking hands and drank deeply, barely pausing for breath until it was empty. "More?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He filled the bowl twice more before she finally stopped, some color returning to her pale green skin. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. When you are well enough to travel, you can go wherever you wish. Humans do not help orcs out of kindness. What is your price?" Xander settled back into his chair, keeping distance between them so she would not feel threatened. "I fought in the war," he said quietly. "I saw what it cost both our peoples. I am tired of killing and hatred. If I can save one life instead of taking it, perhaps that means something." She studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, as though she could see past his words to the truth beneath. Finally she said, "You lost someone. I can see it in your eyes. My brother. The final year of the war." He did not elaborate, and she did not ask. "I am sorry." The words sounded rusty, as though she was unused to speaking them. War takes from everyone. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the window. Xander thought about all the things he should ask her, all the questions about why she had been alone and injured, but exhaustion was already pulling at her eyelids again. "What is your name?" he asked instead. She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she would not answer. Then so quietly he almost missed it. "Thora." "I am Xander." He stood and added another log to the fire. "Sleep now, Thora. We can talk more when you are stronger." She was already asleep before he finished speaking. Over the following days, Thora's strength slowly returned. Xander helped her eat and drink, changed her bandages, and carefully did not ask questions about the injuries that covered her body. She accepted his help with visible discomfort, clearly unused to depending on anyone, but she was practical enough not to refuse aid she desperately needed. On the 4th day, she managed to sit up on her own. On the 5th, she could stand with support, though her frostbitten feet made walking agony. Xander fashioned crutches from branches and watched as she determinedly hobbled around the cabin, refusing to show weakness even as sweat beaded on her forehead from the pain. "You do not have to push yourself so hard," he told her. "Healing takes time." "I have been here too long already," she said, gripping the crutches until her knuckles went pale. "You have risked enough by sheltering me. The nearest village is 15 miles away. No one knows you are here. They will find me eventually. They always do." She said it with such certainty that Xander felt a chill. "Who is hunting you?" Thora's jaw tightened, and she turned away to stare into the fire. "It does not matter. It matters if they are going to come here looking for you. They will not. They believe I am dead." She touched her ribs carefully, where the worst of the bruising had begun to yellow. "They made certain I would not survive the wilderness. Who did this to you, Thora?" She was silent for so long he thought she would not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My own people." Xander had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still shocked him. Orcs were tribal, living by strict codes of honor and clan loyalty. For them to cast out one of their own, especially a woman, spoke of some terrible crime or betrayal. "What did you do?" he asked carefully. "I was born." Bitter humor twisted her mouth. That was crime enough. Before he could press further, she hobbled to the corner where he had set up a pallet for her to sleep on, lowering herself down with obvious relief. The conversation was over, and Xander knew better than to push. Trust, like healing, would take time. As winter deepened, a strange rhythm developed in the cabin. Xander went about his daily work while Thora slowly recovered, and gradually they began to talk. At first their conversations were brief and practical, but as the days passed they grew longer, more personal. She told him about growing up in the Eastern Territories, about the harsh beauty of the volcanic highlands where her clan made their home. She described the great stone halls carved into mountainsides, the forge fires that burned day and night, the songs her people sang that could shake the very earth. When she spoke of these things, her face would light up with a longing so intense it was painful to witness. In return, Xander told her about his life on the frontier, about building this cabin with his own hands after the war ended. He had been a soldier, he admitted, but before that he had been a farmer's son who dreamed of having his own land. This isolated plot at the edge of the wilderness was not much, but it was his. Why so far from other humans? Thora asked one evening as they shared a meal by the fire. She could walk without crutches now, though she still limped badly. "I needed the quiet. After the war, I could not bear to be around people. Too many questions, too much remembering." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Out here there is just the land and the sky. It is enough." "You are lonely," she said. It was not a question. "Sometimes. But loneliness is better than being surrounded by people and still feeling alone." She nodded slowly. "I understand that. Do you miss your clan?" Her expression shuddered. "I miss what I thought they were, not what they truly are." Xander wanted to ask more, to understand what had happened to put such pain in her eyes, but he respected the walls she had built around that hurt. Instead he asked, "What will you do when you are well enough to leave?" Thora stared into her bowl, stirring the stew without eating. "I do not know. I cannot return home. I cannot go to another clan. They would never accept an exile, and I certainly cannot stay in human lands." "Why not?" She looked at him as though he had gone mad. "I am an orc, Xander. Your people hate us. The only reason you helped me is because you are either unusually kind or unusually foolish." "Perhaps both," he admitted with a slight smile. "But you could stay here, at least through the winter. The snow is too deep for safe travel anyway. You would let an orc woman live in your home. What would your neighbors say if they knew?" "I have no neighbors close enough to care, and it is not as though I am suggesting anything improper. You would have your own space, and in spring, if you wish to leave, you can." Thora set down her bowl and turned those amber eyes on him with full force. "Why are you doing this? No one is this generous without reason. What do you truly want from me?" Xander considered the question seriously. What did he want? The honest answer surprised him. "Company," he said finally. "Someone to talk to who does not look at me and see only the soldier I was. Someone who understands what it is to be alone." He paused. "And perhaps, in some small way, to prove that the war does not have to define us forever, that an orc and a human can share a roof without violence." She searched his face for deception and found none. Slowly, she nodded. "Very well, I will stay through the winter, but I will earn my keep. I am not a charity case." "Fair enough. Can you cook?" "Better than you, I would wager." She was right. The next evening, Thora took over the cooking using the limited supplies Xander had stored, and the result was the best meal he had eaten in months. She had a talent for seasoning and knew how to coax flavor from even simple ingredients. As they ate, Xander found himself watching her move around his kitchen with growing comfort in her surroundings, and something warm uncurled in his chest. This was a mistake, he told himself. Getting attached to her was foolish. She would leave in spring and he would be alone again. But even knowing this, he could not bring himself to maintain distance. The weeks passed, and winter locked the world in ice and silence. Thora grew stronger each day, her limp fading until only the slightest hitch remained in her step. The frostbite damage to her toes had not been as severe as Xander feared, and while she would always bear scars, she regained full use of her feet. With her health restored, Thora threw herself into work around the cabin. She chopped wood with an efficiency that put Xander to shame, her orcish strength allowing her to split logs he would have struggled with. She mended the roof where snow had leaked through, repaired his tools with surprising skill at the forge, and even improved his trapping lines with techniques from her own people. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk. Thora told him stories from orcish history, tales of great warriors and wise shamans, of the old days before humans had pushed into the eastern lands and started the conflicts that led to war. Xander shared what he knew of human history in turn, and they found surprising common ground in their people's stories. "We are not so different," Thora said one night, staring into the flames. "Both our peoples value honor and strength. Both tell stories of heroes who fought for what they believed in, yet we spent generations killing each other." "Fear," Xander said quietly. "Fear of what we did not understand. It is easier to hate someone when you do not see them as a person." "And do you see me as a person, Xander Frost?" He looked at her, really looked, seeing not an orc but Thora. The way she smiled when she teased him about his poor cooking, the care she took with small tasks, doing nothing halfway, the sadness that sometimes crossed her face when she thought he was not watching, the strength and dignity she carried despite everything that had been done to her. "Yes," he said, "I do." Something shifted in the air between them then, a charge like the moment before lightning strikes. Thora held his gaze, and in her amber eyes he saw want and fear warring with each other. She looked away first, standing abruptly. "I should sleep. Morning comes early." She retreated to her corner of the cabin, and Xander sat alone by the fire for a long time, trying to deny the truth that was becoming impossible to ignore. He was falling in love with her. With an orc woman who would leave him when spring came, who could never truly belong in his world nor he in hers. It was foolish and hopeless, and yet his heart would not listen to reason. The deep cold of midwinter brought a blizzard that lasted 3 days. Snow piled against the cabin walls until they were nearly buried, and the wind howled like a living thing trying to claw its way inside. Xander and Thora were trapped together in the small space, forced into an intimacy that made the tension between them almost unbearable. On the second day, as they huddled close to the fire to conserve warmth, Thora finally told him the truth about her past. "I am not just an exile," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I am the daughter of Chieftain Grokter, ruler of the Stone Fang clan. Or I was, until he discovered I had been meeting with a human emissary in secret, trying to broker a real peace between our peoples." Xander stared at her in shock. "You are royalty." "Was. That title was stripped from me along with everything else." She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. My father called me traitor, said I had dishonored our clan by treating with humans as equals. He wanted to execute me publicly to send a message about the price of betrayal, but my mother begged for my life. So instead he had me beaten and cast out into the wilderness in the dead of winter, with nothing but the rags on my back. He knew I would die slowly, suffering for my crimes. Thora. Xander reached out carefully and took her hand. She did not pull away. You did nothing wrong. Wanting peace is not a crime. To my father it is. To many of my people it is. They would rather die proud than live in peace with humans, and I understand why. Your people have taken so much from us, pushed us from our ancestral lands, killed our warriors. Trust does not come easily. But you tried anyway. I had to. I saw what the war was doing to my clan, to all the clans. We were destroying ourselves for pride and vengeance. I thought if I could just make the human leaders see that we could coexist, that we did not have to be enemies forever. She trailed off, shaking her head. I was naive, a foolish girl who thought she could change the world with pretty words. You were brave, Xander corrected. Braver than most warriors. It takes more courage to pursue peace than to wage war. She looked at him with such vulnerability in her eyes that it stole his breath. Do you truly believe that? I do. He squeezed her hand gently. And for what it is worth, I am glad your mother convinced your father to spare you, glad that you survived long enough to find my door. Glad for every moment you have been here, Xander. She said his name like a prayer and a warning all at once. This cannot be anything more than what it is. You know that. I know. But he did not let go of her hand, and she did not pull away. They sat like that through the night, hands clasped, saying nothing more. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin there was warmth and an understanding that went deeper than words. They both knew the truth now, the impossible thing growing between them, but neither had the courage yet to speak it aloud. When the storm finally broke, Xander went out to clear paths to his animals and check that they had survived. He was gone for several hours, and when he returned he found Thora standing at the window, staring east toward the distant mountains where her people lived. You regret it? He asked quietly. Trying for peace. Would you do it again knowing how it ended? She did not turn from the window. Every moment of every day I regret it. And yes, I would do it again in a heartbeat. Some things are worth suffering for. What will you do if you cannot return home? You said yourself no other clan will take you. I will survive. I always have. But there was no conviction in her voice, only weariness. Or you could stay here. Now she did turn, and there was anguish written across her face. You do not know what you are asking. If anyone discovered you were sheltering me, giving sanctuary to an orc exile who tried to treat with humans, you would be branded a traitor yourself. Your own people would turn on you. Let them. I am tired of living in fear of what others might think. Xander, please. She crossed the room to stand before him, and he could see tears gathering in her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. Do not make this harder than it already is. When spring comes, I will leave. I have to, for both our sakes. What if I do not want you to leave? Then you are a fool. You said I might be a fool the first day we met. I am beginning to think you were right. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, and she leaned into his touch despite herself. Stay with me, Thora. Not as a guest or an obligation. Stay because you want to, because what is between us is real and worth fighting for. You do not understand what it would mean. The isolation, the danger, the constant threat of discovery. You would give up any chance of a normal life, of a human wife and children, of acceptance in your own society. I do not want a normal life if it means losing you. The tears spilled over then, tracking down her green cheeks. "I am scared," she whispered. "I have never been more terrified in my life than I am right now." "So am I." He brushed away her tears with his thumb. "But I would rather be scared with you than safe without you." She made a sound between a laugh and a sob, and then she was kissing him. Her tusks made it awkward at first, but they adjusted, learning the shape of each other. She tasted like the honey tea she favored, and when she wrapped her strong arms around him, Xander felt more at home than he ever had in his life. They broke apart breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "This is madness," Thora said, but she was smiling. "Probably," Xander agreed, "but it is our madness." That night they moved her pallet next to his, and they fell asleep in each other's arms while the fire burned low. For the first time since fleeing her homeland, Thora slept without nightmares. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Xander's life. They fell into a new rhythm, partners in everything. They worked together to maintain the cabin and prepare for the coming spring planting. They cooked together, ate together, talked long into the night about everything and nothing. And when words ran out, they found other ways to communicate, learning each other's bodies with gentle reverence. Thora taught Xander phrases in the orcish tongue, and he taught her songs from his childhood. She showed him fighting techniques from her people, movements that emphasized strength and efficiency. He taught her to read and write in the common script, something most orcs considered beneath them. "My father would be horrified," Thora said one evening as she carefully copied letters onto a slate. "He always said that writing was for weak humans who could not remember their own history." "Your father was wrong about many things," Xander said diplomatically. She set down the chalk and looked at him with those piercing amber eyes. "Do you think I will ever stop caring what he thinks of me? Even after everything he did? He is your father. We cannot choose who we love or whose approval we crave, even when they do not deserve it." Xander moved to sit beside her on the bench. "But his judgment does not define your worth. You are remarkable, Thora. Kind, strong, brilliant. You tried to bring peace to two peoples at war, and you nearly died for it. That takes more honor than any warrior who simply swings a sword. You always know what to say to make me feel better." "I only speak the truth." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I used to dream about what my life would be. I thought I would marry a warrior from a neighboring clan, forge alliances for my father, bear strong sons to carry on our legacy. Everything was planned, predictable. Now look at me. Exile living with a human in the middle of nowhere, about as far from my planned life as possible. Do you regret it? Not even for a moment." She tilted her face up to kiss him. "This is better than any life I could have imagined." But their happiness could not last forever. Reality intruded on a gray morning in early spring when Xander went to check his trap lines and found boot prints in the melting snow. Human boot prints, and recent. Someone had been on his land. He hurried back to the cabin and found Thora already alert, having spotted the tracks from the window. "How many?" she asked. "2, maybe 3. They did not come to the cabin, just passed through the southern border of my property." "Hunters, possibly, or they could be looking for something." He did not say someone, but they both thought it. Over the next few days they saw more signs of activity. Distant smoke from campfires, the sound of voices carrying on the wind, fresh tracks in the mud. Someone was definitely in the area, and they seemed to be searching for something. "I should leave," Thora said one night as they lay in the darkness, both too worried to sleep. "If they are looking for me, I am putting you in danger by staying. We do not know they are looking for you, and even if they are, you are not going anywhere. We face this together. Xander, you cannot fight off a hunting party for my sake. If they are from my clan sent to confirm my death, they will not hesitate to kill you for sheltering me. Then we will make sure they do not find you here." They spent the next day preparing. Xander concealed anything that might indicate someone other than himself lived in the cabin, while Thora prepared a pack with supplies in case she needed to flee quickly into the forest. They established signals and hiding places, plans for every contingency they could imagine. The confrontation came 2 days later. Xander was outside splitting wood when 3 orc warriors emerged from the tree line. They were massive, each one standing over 7 feet tall, their skin ranging from deep forest green to grayish brown. They wore armor of hardened leather and steel, and carried weapons that spoke of brutal efficiency. All 3 had the clan markings of the Stone Fangs tattooed on their necks. For a moment, Xander stood frozen, axe in hand, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to run or attack. These were warriors from Thora's clan. They had to be searching for her. The largest of the 3, a grizzled veteran with a scarred face and iron-gray streaks in his dark hair, stepped forward. "Human," he said in heavily accented common tongue. "We seek information. You help, you live." Xander carefully set down his axe and stood straight, refusing to show fear. "What information?" Trader orc, female, small tusks, 20 summers. "She fled from justice months past. We track her this direction. You see such creature." Every fiber of Xander's being screamed at him to lie, to send them away in the wrong direction. But orcs could smell deception, or so the old soldiers' tales claimed. If he lied and they knew it, they would search the cabin and find Thora. "Why are you searching for her?" he asked instead. The warrior's eyes narrowed. "This not your concern. You answer question or we search your dwelling. Many travelers pass through these lands. I cannot keep track of them all." It was not quite a lie, just misdirection. What did this orc do to warrant 3 warriors hunting her? She betray her clan, betray her blood. She conspire with human scum to weaken our people. The warrior spat on the ground. "She deserve death she receive. We only seek confirmed body." Inside the cabin, Thora would be hearing every word. Xander prayed she would stay hidden, stay silent. If she died in the wilderness, her body would have been consumed by animals or buried in snow. You will find no trace of her now. Perhaps. The warrior studied him with sharp intelligence. "You are veteran, yes. I see it in how you stand, how you watch for attack. You fight in the war." "I did my duty, as did you. The war is over now. War never over, it only sleep." The warrior gestured to his companions and they began to fan out, moving toward the cabin. "We search. If you speak truth, you have nothing to fear." Xander moved to block their path, knowing it was futile but unable to stand aside. "This is my land. You have no right to search my home." The warrior's hand dropped to his sword. "You refuse us entry. You hide something, human. I protect my property and my privacy." "Would you allow humans to march into your home and rifle through your possessions without cause?" For a moment, tension stretched so tight that violence seemed inevitable. Then the warrior threw back his head and laughed, a booming sound that startled birds from nearby trees. "You have courage, small human. Foolish courage, but courage still. Very well. We respect your property." He signaled his companions to halt, and they obeyed, though one of them looked disappointed at being denied the chance to intimidate Xander further. The leader turned back to Xander with a considering expression. "I give you warning, out of respect for fellow warrior. If you have seen Trader Orc, you tell no one you see her. If you help her, you become traitor too. Her own father put price on proof of her death. Many hunt this prize. If they find you have given her shelter." He drew one thick finger across his throat in the universal gesture of execution. "I understand," Xander said carefully, "but I have seen no orc woman, traitor or otherwise." The warrior stared at him for a long moment, and Xander was certain he could see right through the deception. Then the orc nodded slowly. "Winter is hard. Many die. Likely she is bones in snow somewhere, food for wolves. We report this to Chieftain Grokter." He turned to leave, then paused. "You have orc smell in your home, faint but present. If I were you, I wash everything very thoroughly. Other hunters may not be so understanding as me." They left without another word, melting back into the forest as silently as creatures that large could manage. Xander stood rooted to the spot, heart hammering until they were long out of sight. Only then did he rush into the cabin. Thora sat in the corner where she had hidden, pressed against the wall with a knife clutched in her shaking hands. Tears streamed down her face, and when she saw him, she let out a sob of relief and rage combined. "They will tell my father they found no proof of my death," she said. "He will send more hunters, better trackers. This will not end, Xander. They will keep coming until they find me." Xander knelt beside her and gently took the knife from her hands before she could hurt herself with it. "Then we make sure they do not find you. That warrior was right about one thing. We need to eliminate any trace of your scent from the cabin. Tomorrow we will ride to the trading post and get supplies, establish my presence there as a solitary human so if anyone asks, people will confirm I live alone." "You are thinking like a soldier," Thora said, wiping at her tears. "I am protecting what is mine," he corrected. "And you are mine, Thora. I will not let them take you." She threw her arms around him and held on as though he were the only solid thing in a collapsing world. "I am sorry. I am so sorry I brought this danger to your door. You brought yourself to my door. Everything else I choose freely." That night they burned sage and herbs to mask scents, scrubbed the cabin from top to bottom, and moved all of Thora's personal belongings into a hidden compartment Xander built beneath the floorboards. It would not fool a determined search, but it might be enough if anyone came looking. In the morning, true to his word, Xander rode to the trading post 15 miles south. It was the first time he had left Thora alone since she arrived, and he hated every moment of it, but the performance was necessary. He spent the day there, buying supplies he did not really need, trading furs, and making conversation with the proprietor and other trappers who drifted through. "Been a quiet winter for you out there, Frost?" the proprietor asked as he tallied up Xander's purchases. "Quiet enough." "Good for trapping. See any orc sign? Heard there was a hunting party came through few days back searching for something." Xander kept his expression neutral. "Saw tracks once or twice, gave them wide berth. War may be over, but I have no interest in testing orc hospitality." Sensible man. "They say they are looking for one of their own who betrayed their clan or some such. Apparently Chieftain's daughter went bad, tried to make nice with humans. Can you imagine? What orc in their right mind would trust us? Hard to fathom," Xander agreed blandly, though his stomach churned. "I doubt they will find her. Winter claims everyone who is not careful. Truth in that. You staying in town tonight? Got a room at the inn if you want company and a hot meal you did not have to cook yourself. Appreciate the offer, but I need to get back before dark. Animals need tending." He rode home as the sun set, pushing his horse harder than was wise on the muddy roads. When he finally reached the cabin and found Thora safe and whole, waiting anxiously by the window, relief washed through him so powerfully his knees went weak. "All is well," he assured her as she rushed to him. "I established my presence as a reclusive trapper living alone. No one suspects anything." "How long can we maintain this deception?" Thora asked. "How long before someone notices details that do not add up? As long as we need to." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her, sage and smoke and something uniquely Thora. "We will find a way to make this work. I swear it." But doubt had taken root in both their hearts. The visit from the orc warriors had shattered the peaceful illusion they had been living in. Now danger felt immediate and real. a sword hanging over them by the thinnest thread. Spring came in full, transforming the world from white silence to green abundance. Xander began his planting, and Thora helped despite the risk of being seen from a distance. They were careful, always watching the tree line for signs of observers, but the work had to be done. They would need the crops to survive the next winter. As they worked side by side in the fields, Xander found himself imagining a future he had never allowed himself to want before. What if they could truly make this work? What if they could build a life together here, away from the prejudices of both their peoples? It seemed impossible, but every day Thora was still with him made the impossible feel slightly more within reach. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Thora said quietly, "I have been thinking about what the warrior said, about my father placing a price on proof of my death. What about it? If someone brought him false proof, convinced him I was truly dead, the hunt would end. We would be safe." Xander turned to look at her, dread pooling in his stomach. "What are you suggesting? There are ways to fake a death." "A body burned beyond recognition, identified only by some personal item that belonged to me. If we could somehow convince my father that I had been found dead, consumed by fire or wild animals, he might call off the search. Thora, that is incredibly dangerous. If the deception was discovered, it would only make things worse. But if it worked, we could truly be free. No more hiding, no more looking over our shoulders in constant fear." She took his hands in hers. "I know it is a risk. But what we have now, this constant tension, it will break us eventually. We need a permanent solution." She was right, much as he hated to admit it. The stress of waiting for discovery was taking its toll on both of them. But the plan she suggested was fraught with peril. They would need to be absolutely convincing, and one mistake could cost both their lives. "We would need help," Xander said slowly. "Someone who knows orc burial customs, who could make the fake death seem believable to trained warriors." "There is someone," Thora said hesitantly. "Before I was exiled, I had allies, other orcs who believed in peace between our peoples. One of them, a shaman named Kraga, she might help us. She was furious when my father cast me out. She called it cowardice masquerading as honor. Can we trust her, with my life, with both our lives?" Thora squeezed his hands. "But reaching her would be dangerous. I would have to enter orc territory, and if anyone besides Kraga saw me—" "Then I will go," Xander said firmly. "Tell me how to find her, and I will speak with her on your behalf. You would do that?" "Walk into the heart of orc lands alone. I would do anything for you. Surely you know that by now." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and when they pulled apart there were tears in her eyes again. "I do not deserve you. You deserve everything good in this world and more." They spent the next week preparing. Thora drew maps showing the paths into orc territory and the location of Kraga's dwelling on the northern edge of Stone Fang lands. She taught Xander the appropriate greetings and gestures of respect, phrases in Orcish that might save his life if he encountered patrols. She gave him a token, a small carved stone that had belonged to her mother, as proof that he came with her blessing. "Kraga will recognize this," Thora said as she pressed it into his palm. "My mother gave one to each of her children. Kraga witnessed the ceremony." The night before Xander was to leave, they lay together in the darkness, neither able to sleep. Fear and anticipation twisted together in his gut. So much could go wrong. He could be killed by orc patrols before ever reaching Kraga. The shaman might refuse to help or might have changed her position on human-orc relations. The plan to fake Thora's death might fail spectacularly and bring even more danger down on their heads. But doing nothing was not an option. They could not live this way forever, always afraid, always hiding. If there was even a chance this could work, they had to try. Come back to me, Thora whispered in the darkness. Whatever happens, promise you will come back. I promise, Xander said, and prayed it was a promise he could keep. He left at dawn, riding east toward the volcanic highlands where the Stone Fang clan made their home. The journey would take 3 days if all went well, longer if he had to avoid patrols or take indirect routes. Thora stood at the cabin door watching until he disappeared into the trees, and the sight of her small figure against the morning light nearly broke his resolve. It took everything in him to keep riding. The first 2 days of travel were uneventful. Xander saw signs of orc presence, old campfires and markers, but encountered no one. On the 3rd day, as he entered the foothills of the volcanic range, he spotted his first patrol. They were young warriors, barely more than boys, probably on their first ranging assignment. Xander could have avoided them, but Thora had told him that attempting to sneak through orc lands would be seen as hostile. Better to be open and face the consequences. He rode directly toward them, hands visible and empty of weapons. They spotted him quickly and formed a defensive line, spears lowered. When he was close enough to speak, he called out the greeting Thora had taught him, stumbling over the harsh syllables. The orcs looked surprised to hear their language from human lips. The leader, a young male with bright green skin and eager eyes, stepped forward. Why does human speak Stone Fang words? Why does human come to our lands? I seek Shaman Kraga, Xander said carefully. I bring message from friend. I mean no harm, only to speak and leave in peace. What friend? The young orc demanded suspiciously. What human has orc friend? Xander pulled out the carved stone token Thora had given him. I carry proof of my words. Will you take me to Kraga, or do I need to find her myself? The orcs gathered around the token, speaking rapidly in their own tongue. Finally, the leader nodded. We take you, but you try anything, we kill you fast. Understand? I understand. They confiscated his weapons and bound his hands, not cruelly but firmly. Then they marched him deeper into the highlands through landscapes of stark volcanic beauty. The earth here was black and red, veined with minerals that glowed in the light. Steam vented from cracks in the ground, and the air smelled of sulfur and ancient stone. After several hours, they reached a dwelling carved into the side of a volcanic flow, its entrance framed by intricate carvings of animals and symbols Xander did not recognize. The young warriors called out, and a figure emerged from the shadows within. Kraga was ancient, her green skin weathered and lined like old leather, her white hair bound in elaborate braids threaded with bones and stones. But her eyes were sharp and bright, missing nothing. She looked at Xander with curiosity rather than hostility, which he took as a good sign. Why does human come to Kraga? She asked. Her voice was surprisingly strong for one so old. Xander was released from his bonds and given the token back. He held it up so she could see clearly. I come with a message from Thora, daughter of Grokter. She lives. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Kraga's eyes went wide and she snatched the token from his hand, examining it closely. This is hers, I know it well. She looked up at him with fierce intensity. Where? How? She came to my home in the dead of winter, nearly frozen to death. I took her in and she has lived with me since. He hesitated, unsure how to explain the relationship. We care for each other. Kraga stared at him for a long moment, then began to laugh. It was a dry, crackling sound like fire in old timber. She finds human to love. Oh, Grokter must be spinning in his hall. Foolish girl always did have her mother's heart. She beckoned him inside. Come. We talk properly, away from young ears that carry gossip. The interior of Kraga's dwelling was warm and surprisingly spacious, lit by the glow of volcanic vents channeled through carved stones. Herbs hung drying from the ceiling, and strange implements covered every surface. The shaman settled onto a pile of furs and gestured for Xander to sit across from her. "Tell me everything," she commanded. "Leave out nothing." Xander told her the whole story, from finding Thora on his doorstep to falling in love with her to the visit from the hunting party. He explained their plan to fake Thora's death, and asked if Kraga would help make it convincing enough to fool Grokter and end the hunt. When he finished, Kraga sat in silence for a long time, her expression unreadable. Finally she spoke. "You love her, truly." "This is not just human using orc for pleasure or curiosity. I love her more than my own life," Xander said with absolute conviction. "I would die before allowing harm to come to her." "Good, because what you ask is dangerous for all involved. If deception is discovered, Grokter will not just kill Thora. He will kill you, kill me, destroy everyone who helped her. His pride cannot bear the betrayal he already feels. To learn she still lives and mocks him with false death," she shook her head. "His rage would know no bounds." "I understand the risk, but we cannot live as we have been, always hiding, always afraid. We need this chance at a real life together." Kraga nodded slowly. "Thora deserves happiness. She deserves peace. I will help you." She stood and began gathering items from around the dwelling. "We will need remains. Not human or orc, but something that can pass as orc once burned. Large animal, bear perhaps. We will need Thora's belongings, things Grokter would recognize. And we will need ceremony, proper funeral rites so that any who investigate will see tradition was honored." "How do we deliver the proof?" "Leave that to me. I have ways of getting information to Grokter without revealing myself as source. In 3 weeks, I will send word that remains were found in the western forests, that local shamans performed last rites for forgotten daughter. By the time Grokter sends warriors to investigate, the evidence will be in place." Xander felt hope blooming in his chest for the first time in weeks. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to us." "I know exactly what it means. It means defying chieftain and risking everything for chance at peace between our peoples, even if that peace is only for 2 souls." Kraga's ancient eyes softened. "Thora tried to bridge the divide between orc and human the big way, with treaties and politics. She failed, and it cost her everything. But maybe small way, 2 hearts choosing each other despite what the world says, maybe that is how real peace begins. One connection at a time." She gave Xander detailed instructions for preparing the site where Thora's remains would supposedly be found, specific items that would need to be left as evidence, the exact wording of the death ritual that would need to be carved into a memorial stone. He committed it all to memory, afraid to write anything down in case the information was discovered. Before he left, Kraga gripped his shoulder with surprising strength. "You protect her, human. You keep her safe and happy. She is rarest thing in this world, an orc with vision beyond clan and tradition. That kind of courage must not be wasted." "I will protect her with my last breath," Xander vowed. "Good. Now go quickly before more patrols find you, and tell Thora that Kraga remembers. Tell her that her mother would be proud of the woman she has become." The journey home was faster than the journey out, driven by urgency and hope. Xander pushed himself and his horse hard, stopping only when absolutely necessary. He had the means now to free them both from fear. He just had to execute the plan perfectly. He reached the cabin on the evening of the 6th day, exhausted and filthy but triumphant. Thora ran out to meet him, and he caught her up in his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with relief. "You came back," she said, covering his face with kisses. "I was so afraid something had happened." "I am fine, better than fine. Kraga agreed to help us. They went inside and Xander explained everything while Thora listened with growing excitement. When he finished, she was crying again, but these were tears of joy. "We can truly be free," she whispered. "We can have a future. We can have everything," Xander agreed. They spent the next weeks preparing meticulously. Xander hunted a massive bear and prepared its remains according to Kraga's instructions, burning them in a specific way that would make identification impossible, but leave enough for investigation. They selected items from Thora's past, a few pieces she had carried with her when she fled, things her father would recognize. They found a spot deep in the western forest, far from the cabin but not so far as to be implausible, and staged the scene. It was grim work, creating a false grave for someone who stood beside you, alive and vibrant. But they did what needed to be done. When they were finished, the site looked exactly as it should, a lonely place where an exile had died alone and been given proper rites by a compassionate wanderer. Then came the hardest part, waiting. 3 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Xander returned to the trading post twice more, maintaining his presence as a solitary trapper, listening for any gossip about orc activity. Finally, on the second trip, he heard what they had been waiting for. "Strange thing happened last week," the proprietor said as he poured Xander a drink. "Orc messenger came through, looking for the way to some spot in the western forest. Said they had received word that remains were found, needed to investigate." Xander kept his expression neutral. "Remains of what?" Did not say. But reading between the lines, I think it was that exile they have been hunting. The chieftain's daughter who supposedly betrayed her clan. Word is they found her dead in the woods, gave her a proper funeral and everything. Huh. Well, at least they can stop tearing through the countryside looking for her. Right. Been nervous having so many orcs prowling around. Good riddance to the whole business. The proprietor leaned in conspiratorially. Though between you and me, I always wondered what she did that was so terrible. Heard rumors she was trying to make peace with humans. Seems like that should be praised, not punished. Different world, different codes, Xander said carefully. We cannot judge. Suppose not. Anyway, drink up. You look like you could use it. Xander finished his drink and rode home with his heart pounding. The orcs had taken the bait. Now they just had to wait and see if the deception held. 4 more agonizing days passed before they got confirmation. Xander was working in the garden when he saw a lone figure approaching from the east. He called a warning to Thora, who immediately vanished into the hidden compartment they had prepared. Then he grabbed his bow and waited. The figure resolved into an orc, but not a warrior. It was Kraga, moving with surprising speed for one so ancient, her staff tapping the ground with each step. Xander rushed to meet her, helping her the last distance to the cabin. "It is done," Kraga said without preamble. Grokter sent his best trackers to investigate. They found the site, examined the remains, confirmed the items as belonging to Thora. The death ritual was properly performed and they found no evidence of deception. She smiled grimly. Grokter has declared his daughter dead. The hunt is over. Thora emerged from hiding, tears streaming down her face. "Truly, you are certain?" I witnessed his proclamation myself. He spoke words for the dead, released your spirit to join the ancestors. In the eyes of the Stone Fang clan, you no longer exist. Kraga opened her arms and Thora ran into them, the old shaman holding her close. "You are free, child, truly free." They wept together and Xander stepped back to give them privacy for their reunion. After a while, Kraga pulled away and wiped her eyes. "I cannot stay long. My absence will be noted, but I needed to see with my own eyes that you were well." "I am more than well," Thora said, taking Xander's hand. "I am happy." Kraga looked between them and nodded approvingly. Good, you build good life here, yes. You make the peace you wanted, even if it is only peace between two hearts. We will, Xander promised. Thank you, Kraga, we owe you everything. You owe me nothing, just live well. Love each other, that is payment enough. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Thora, your mother's spirit rests easier knowing you survived. I feel this in my bones. She watches over you still. After Kraga left, Xander and Thora stood together outside the cabin, watching the sun set over their land. For the first time since they had found each other, there was no fear clouding the moment. They were truly free to build a life together. What do we do now? Thora asked softly. We live, Xander said simply. We plant our crops and tend our animals and build a home. We love each other without fear or hiding. We make the life we both deserve. It sounds perfect. It will not be easy. People will talk if they see you. There will always be those who judge us. Let them talk. Let them judge. They cannot touch what we have. She was right. What they had built together was stronger than prejudice or tradition. It was built on respect and trust and love that had been tested by fire and emerged unbroken. As spring turned to summer, they settled into their life together with open joy. They no longer hid Thora's presence, though they remained cautious about who knew she was there. The few neighbors who did eventually discover them living together were shocked, certainly. But Xander's reputation as a war veteran and Thora's obvious kindness gradually wore down the worst of the hostility. The proprietor at the trading post was the first to accept their relationship, pragmatic man that he was. Times are changing, he said, when Xander finally brought Thora with him to trade. War is over. Old hatreds need to die too, or what was the point of all that bloodshed? You two seem happy enough. That is what matters. Others were slower to come around, but slowly the news spread that Xander Frost had taken an orc woman as his partner, and the sky had not fallen. A few other veterans, men who had also seen too much death during the war, came by to meet Thora and judge for themselves. Most left convinced that whatever they had expected, she was nothing like the monsters they had fought. Summer was glorious. Their crops grew strong under Thora's careful tending, and Xander's trapping lines were more productive than ever with her help improving them. They worked side by side in comfortable partnership, learning each other's rhythms and methods. In the evenings, they would sit outside and watch the stars emerge, talking about everything and nothing. Thora told him more about her childhood, the good memories before politics and war poisoned everything. Xander shared stories of his own youth, the simple happiness of life before soldiers came recruiting. You ever regret it? Thora asked one night as they lay in the grass, fingers intertwined, staring up at the cosmos. Giving up a normal life for this? For me? Never, Xander said firmly. This is not giving up a normal life. This is choosing an extraordinary one. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. Even knowing the challenges we will face, the judgment, the isolation from both our peoples, even knowing all of that. He rolled onto his side to look at her properly. Thora, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You make me laugh, you challenge me to be better, you see me as I truly am and love me anyway. How could I possibly regret that? She turned to face him, her amber eyes reflecting starlight. I love you, Xander Frost. I do not say it enough, but I do, more than I thought possible to love anyone. I love you too. He kissed her softly, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. As autumn approached, they faced their first real test as a couple known to others. A human family, refugees from a village destroyed by raiders, came seeking shelter. The father had been injured and they had 3 small children in desperate need of safety. Xander wanted to help immediately, but he worried about how the family would react to Thora. We have to try, Thora said. If they cannot accept me, we will send them on their way with supplies. But we cannot turn away people in need because we are afraid of their reaction." She was right, of course. They took the family in, and the children's reaction was immediate. After a moment of wariness, they were fascinated by Thora, asking endless questions about her tusks and her green skin, and where she came from. Their innocent curiosity broke through their parents' fear, and by the end of the first evening, the mother was helping Thora prepare dinner while the father spoke quietly with Xander about the raiders. "Thank you for this," the father said as they sat by the fire after the children were asleep. "We have been traveling for weeks and every door was closed to us. You and your partner, you are good people." "Thora is my partner in every way that matters," Xander said quietly. "I know it is unusual. I know it goes against what most people believe about orcs and humans. But she is the finest person I have ever known, and I will not have her disrespected under this roof." The man nodded slowly. "I understand. And after seeing how gentle she is with my children, how could I think otherwise? The war taught us to hate, but maybe it is time we learned something new." The family stayed for 2 weeks while the father healed, and when they left, they did so with full stomachs and enough supplies to reach the next settlement safely. More importantly, they left as friends, and Xander knew they would spread word that not all orcs were monsters, that peace between the races was possible. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. As winter approached again, Xander and Thora prepared their cabin for the cold months ahead. They had ample supplies now, having worked together through the full growing season. The cabin had been expanded with a proper addition, giving them more space and comfort. They had built a life together that felt solid and real. On the first snowfall of winter, Xander asked Thora to marry him. They were outside, watching fat flakes drift down from the gray sky, when he pulled out the ring he had commissioned from the trading post silversmith. It was simple but beautiful, etched with both human and orcish symbols for eternal partnership. "Thora," he said, taking her hand, "I know we cannot have a legal marriage, that no priest or shaman would bless our union. But I want to make a promise to you anyway, in front of the sky and the earth, and whatever gods may listen. Will you be my wife? Will you build this life with me today and all the days to come?" She stared at the ring with wonder, then at him with eyes full of tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that tasted of snow and joy. When they broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "We will have our own ceremony," Xander said. "We will speak our own vows and make our own promises. We do not need approval from anyone else." "Just us," Thora agreed. "That is all we need." They married themselves that night, standing before the fire in their cabin. They had no witnesses except the stars visible through the window and the animals in their barn. They spoke vows they had written themselves, promising love and loyalty and partnership through whatever challenges came. They exchanged tokens, the ring for Thora and a bracelet she had woven for Xander from her own hair, braided with copper wire in the orcish tradition. When they sealed their promises with a kiss, it felt more sacred than any ceremony conducted by a priest. This was their love, built by their own hands, belonging to no one but themselves. The second winter together was easier than the first, partly because they were better prepared, but mostly because they faced it as partners in every sense. They spent long evenings planning their future, talking about expanding the farm, maybe raising some animals for trade. Thora wanted to start a garden of medicinal herbs, using knowledge from her people's healing traditions. Xander wanted to improve the cabin further, make it a real home they could be proud of. "We should have children someday," Thora said one night as they lay together in bed. if such a thing is even possible between our peoples. Is it possible? Xander asked, surprised by the idea. I do not know. It has never happened that I know of, but that does not mean it cannot, and even if we cannot have children of our blood, we could adopt. There are always orphans in need of homes, human and orc alike. Xander imagined it, children running through their fields, a family built from love rather than just blood. The idea filled him with hope and longing. I would like that, a family of our own. When we are ready, Thora said, when the world is a little more prepared for what we represent. The world will never be fully ready. We will just have to be brave enough to do it anyway. She laughed and kissed him. You are right. When have we ever let the world's readiness stop us? Spring came again, bringing with it new life and renewed hope. Xander and Thora planted their fields together, working in comfortable rhythm. They had been together for over a year now, and it felt like a lifetime and no time at all simultaneously. One morning, as they worked in the garden, a rider approached from the south. Xander tensed automatically, but as the figure drew closer, he recognized the trading post proprietor. The man dismounted and approached with a wide smile. Xander, Thora, he greeted them warmly. I have news I thought you would want to hear. There has been a development in the territorial negotiations between humans and orcs. What kind of development? Xander asked cautiously. A few weeks back, representatives from 3 orc clans and the western human settlements met under a truce banner. They are talking about establishing official trade relations and mutual defense pacts. Apparently some of the younger orcs and humans are tired of the old conflicts. They want to try something new. Thora's face lit up with cautious hope. Truly, they are attempting real peace negotiations. They are. And word is spreading about other mixed communities, other humans and orcs who have chosen to coexist peacefully. You two are not as alone as you thought. The proprietor pulled out a folded letter from his coat. In fact, this came for you, from someone calling herself Kraga. Thora took the letter with shaking hands and read it quickly, her eyes widening. When she finished, she looked up at Xander with wonder. Kraga writes that she has been advocating for reopening dialogue between our peoples. She has told the Stone Fang elders about other examples of successful human-orc cooperation, without mentioning us specifically. She says the world is changing slowly, and that our example helped inspire her to keep fighting for peace. That is remarkable, Xander said, pulling her into a hug. The proprietor cleared his throat. There is one more thing. The Council of Settlements is looking for people with experience in both cultures to serve as intermediaries and teachers, people who can help both sides understand each other better. I may have mentioned you two as good candidates, if you were interested. Xander and Thora looked at each other, an entire conversation passing between them without words. This was what Thora had wanted from the beginning, to bridge the divide between their peoples. She had tried through politics and failed, but maybe now, with Xander by her side and with proof that peace was possible, they could try again together. We would be honored, Thora said, and Xander nodded his agreement. Over the following months, their quiet life transformed into something much larger. They hosted delegations from both human settlements and orc clans, showing through their own partnership that cooperation was possible. They taught basic language skills, cultural customs, the small things that helped people see each other as individuals rather than enemies. It was exhausting work, and sometimes frustrating when old prejudices surfaced. But slowly, gradually, they saw change taking root. A human farmer and orc craftsman established a joint trading business. A human healer apprenticed with an orc shaman to learn new techniques. Children from both races played together at a neutral trading post, learning each other's games and stories. Not everyone approved. There were still those on both sides who clung to hatred, who saw any cooperation as betrayal. Xander and Thora received threats and condemnation from traditionalists of both races, but they also received support and gratitude from those who wanted something better than endless conflict. Through it all, their love remained the foundation everything else was built upon. On days when the work felt overwhelming, they would retreat to their cabin and remember why they were doing this. They were proof that the divide could be crossed, that love could bloom in the most unlikely places, that peace was worth fighting for. 2 years after Thora had first collapsed on his doorstep, Xander stood with her on their porch, watching a group of mixed human and orc children play in their fields. A formal peace accord had been signed that spring, establishing recognized borders and trade agreements. There was still work to be done, generations of healing ahead, but a beginning had been made. "We did it," Thora said softly, leaning against him. "We actually did it." "You did it," Xander corrected. "You had the vision and the courage. I just followed your lead." "We did it together," she amended. "Everything we have, we built together." He could not argue with that. Together they had survived impossible odds, created a home, and helped change the world. Together was the only way they knew how to be anymore. "I have something to tell you," Thora said, turning to face him with a mixture of nervousness and joy in her expression. "I was not certain until this morning, but I spoke with the healer and she confirmed it. Xander, I am pregnant." For a moment, Xander could not process the words. Then their meaning hit him like a lightning strike, and he let out a whoop of joy that startled the playing children. He picked Thora up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying simultaneously. "How is that possible?" he asked, setting her down gently, suddenly terrified of hurting her. "I thought we did not know if it could happen." "Apparently it can," Thora said, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a child, Xander, a child of both our peoples, living proof that we are not so different after all." Xander thought about everything they had been through, all the pain and struggle and fear. He thought about the world their child would grow up in, still imperfect but better than the one they had known. He thought about the future spreading out before them, full of possibility and hope. "I love you," he said, pulling Thora close. "I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered against his chest. "Always." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Xander and Thora held each other and watched the children play. Their journey had been long and difficult, full of trials that could have broken them. But they had survived, and more than survived. They had built something beautiful from ashes and pain. The future was uncertain, as futures always are. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But they would face them together, as they had faced everything else. And somewhere in that future, their child would grow up knowing that love could cross any divide, that courage meant choosing compassion over fear, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to hate. The stars began to emerge overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their vows and their struggles. Xander thought of his brother, fallen in a war that had seemed so important at the time. He hoped that wherever his brother's spirit rested, it could find peace in knowing that his death had not been meaningless, that from the ashes of that conflict, new growth had emerged. Thora looked up at the stars too, and Xander knew she was thinking of her mother, of the family she had lost when she chose peace over tradition. But she had gained a new family, built from choice and love rather than blood and obligation. Sometimes, he reflected, the families we choose are stronger than the ones we are born into. "What should we name the baby?" Thora asked, practical as always even in moments of profound emotion. "Something that honors both our peoples," Xander suggested. A bridge name, like our child will be a bridge between worlds. They spent the evening discussing names, making plans for the nursery they would need to build, imagining the future they would create for their child. It was the most ordinary of conversations and the most extraordinary, all at once. When they finally went to bed that night, exhausted but happy, Xander held Thora close and marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From that frozen night when she collapsed on his doorstep to this moment, planning for their child, it had been a path neither of them could have imagined. But they had walked it together, and that had made all the difference. In the years that followed, their daughter was born, a beautiful child with her mother's amber eyes and her father's smile. She grew up strong and loved, fluent in both human and orcish tongues, comfortable in both worlds. She became a symbol of hope for many, living proof that the future did not have to repeat the past. More children came, some born to them and some adopted, creating a family as diverse and blended as the world they were helping to build. Their home became a gathering place, a neutral ground where humans and orcs could meet without fear, where children could learn from each other, and old warriors could finally lay down their weapons. Xander and Thora grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched as the peace they had helped nurture took root and spread, as mixed communities became commonplace rather than exceptional, as a new generation grew up knowing cooperation rather than conflict. On their final night together, many decades after that frozen evening when their story began, they sat on their porch watching the sunset one last time. Their children and grandchildren filled the house behind them, a chorus of voices in multiple languages, a testament to everything they had built. "No regrets?" Thora asked, her hand still fitting perfectly in his despite the years. "Not a single one," Xander replied, and meant it with his whole heart. They had taken the broken pieces of their lives and forged them into something beautiful. They had chosen love over hate, courage over fear, hope over despair. And in doing so, they had changed not just their own lives, but the world around them. As the stars emerged and the night songs began, Xander Frost and Thora sat together in peaceful silence, surrounded by the family and the life they had created. It was enough. It was everything. And it was a happy ending they had earned through every trial, every choice, every moment they had chosen each other. The story of the human veteran and the orc princess, who became his wife, would be told for generations, inspiring others to bridge divides and choose love. But for Xander and Thora themselves, the greatest triumph was not the grand changes they had helped bring about, but the simple joy of a life lived together, in love, in peace, in defiance of a world that said it could not be done. They had proved the world wrong. And that, in the end, was the happiest ending of all.